If you're setting your sights on becoming a professional photographer, you will eventually need to invest in professional equipment, particularly your camera body and, of course, good lenses. You need a camera that's reliable and field proven, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. When I'm shooting professionally, I always, without fail, use a Canon 5D Mark III. I always take along a Canon 7D also. It's a great backup camera and could be used standalone as a professional camera. The really big difference is that the Canon 5D Mark III contains a full-frame 22.3 CMOS sensor with 100% of viewfinder coverage. The 5D Mark III has a 61-point autofocus system and can shoot at 6 frames per second of continuous shooting. It also supports 24 frame per second 1080p video in live view. The Mark III is a professional-grade DSLR used by countless professional photographers. It can be relied on in almost all professional shooting situations. I say almost all shooting situations since the 5D Mark III is weather resistant but can't be dragged through the mud in battlefields like a Canon 1DX, which is incredibly expensive. For most professional work, a 5D Mark III fits the bill. I also carry a Canon 7D, as I said, with me as a second camera. The combination of a full-frame 5D Mark III and a crop sensor 7D covers just about any shooting scenario you can imagine. So, what is a full-frame camera? A full-frame DSLR has the same viewing field as a 35mm film SLR. Most digital cameras contain an APS-C sensor, which is called a crop sensor. The crop sensor is much smaller, which affects the overall focal length of the image. As you probably know, there are crop factors associated with crop sensor cameras. For Canon DSLRs, you have to multiply the focal length of the lens you're using by 1.6 to get the true focal length. So why is this so? To put it simply, since the sensor is smaller than the image hitting it, the sensor receives just a portion of the image. This portion is effectively magnified by the crop factor. So if you're using a 35mm lens on a crop sensor Canon DSLR, such as a 7D, the effective focal length is 56mm. Again, this is not the case for full-frame DSLRs. As I mentioned, a full-frame sensor camera has the same viewing field as a 35mm film camera. In general, full-frame sensors are 2.5 times the area than an APS-C or crop sensor. So one effect of having a larger sensor is that it gathers more light, 2.5 times more, so it works more efficiently in low light. It also works better at high ISOs. The Canon 5D Mark III performs really well in low light. So what about cost? The 5D Mark III was introduced in early 2012 and is now discontinued. It initially retailed for $3,500 US. I bought mine used several years ago and paid around $2,200 US. Certainly not cheap, but it was well worth it. Now a 5D Mark III body starts from around $900 up to $1,500, and that's really a bargain for what you get. The everyday lens I use on the 5D Mark III is a Canon 24 to 70mm f4 zoom. It runs around $900 new, which is pretty expensive, but I've seen them for about $600 used. If you would have bought the 5D Mark III as a kit, this is the lens that came with it. And in contrast to the typical kit lens that would come with a lesser camera, this is a truly professional lens. I would have liked to spend the extra money for f2.8, but those run around $1,600, and at the time I bought my camera, I really couldn't afford it. But I still am very happy with the f4 lens. So let's take a look at the mode dial. This is a really telling indication that the 5D Mark III is a truly professional camera. There are no gimmick modes, such as portrait, landscape, close-up, action, and the like, on the consumer-oriented cameras. And as an aside, going back to the Canon 7D, you really have to credit the 7D mode dial. It's the same as the 5D Mark III with the exception of a quote-unquote creative auto mode, which I've never used. The Canon 5D Mark III, of course, supports manual, aperture, and shutter priority modes. Shutter priority on Canon cameras is labeled TV for time value. The 5D Mark III also supports full auto, P or programmed auto mode. This is effectively auto mode but allows you to control ISO, exposure compensation, and white balance. There are 3 custom function selections, C1, C2, and C3, that allow you to utilize different camera features you like. I'll explain and explore the custom modes in a future video. The 5D Mark III is jam-packed with features, and none of them, except for a couple, are fluffy or useless. As you can see, the LCD display in the back is big and bright. The Quick Mode button is right to the right of the display, making access quick and easy. You just rotate the selector wheel to whatever setting you want, set it, and boom, you're ready to shoot. So we'll just quickly scan through the menus in the back so you can see how feature-rich the 5D Mark III is. This is what you get when you first press the menu button. There's image quality. I always shoot in RAW. We have image review time, beep, release shutter without card, lens aberration correction, external speedlight control, and mirror lockup. Next, we have exposure compensation, ISO, auto light optimizer, white balance, custom white balance, shift and bracketing, and color space, all pretty much standard stuff. On the third tab, we have picture style, long exposure, noise reduction. I always keep that off. Highlight tone priority, I've never used that. Dust delete data, multiple exposure, have that disabled. You can do multiple exposures on this, it's really cool. HDR mode, I always keep that disabled. And on the fourth tab, there's live view shooting and movie mode, have that enabled. Autofocus mode and live mode. Grid display, I always use 3x3, kind of like the rule of thirds. Aspect ratio 3:2. Exposure simulation enable, I really don't use that. Silent LV shooting, mode 1. And metering timer at 16 seconds. I think those are all the default values, maybe not the grid display, but I just keep it at the default. The next big menu item is autofocus control. There's 6 cases. We'll start with case 1. There's 3 adjustments: tracking sensitivity, ACell decel tracking, and AF point auto switching. Those are what are going to be adjusted throughout these cases. For case 1, all 3 settings are set to 0. This is a default and it's always worked well for me. Case 2 is continue to track subjects, ignoring possible obstacles, and you can see the tracking sensitivity has been taken down a notch. Case 3 is instantly focus on subjects suddenly entering the autofocus point, and the tracking sensitivity has been bumped up. Same with the ACell decel tracking. Case 4 is for subjects that accelerate or decelerate quickly. You can see the autofocus point auto switching is taken down to 0. This is really good for sports. Case 5 is for erratic subjects moving quickly in any direction. You can see the ACell decel tracking has been taken down to 0. You should be getting a good glimpse at how remarkable this autofocus system is. The last case, case 6, is for subjects that change speed and move erratically. You can see the tracking sensitivity is at 0, ACell decel is at 1, and autofocus point auto switching is at 1. I'm not going to go over the rest of the menu selections, otherwise this video would get boring really fast. Just let it be said that there's just tons of options and it takes a long time, if not forever, to really learn every little function on this camera. I don't use them all. I use a subset and I've been very happy with it. I may explore a lot of these someday, but a lot of them I don't really have a need for, but I feel a great comfort that they're there if I do need them. I also wanted to mention too that the 5D Mark III takes compact flash cards as well as SD cards. You can write simultaneously to both cards, or when one fills up, mainly the compact flash card, when that's full, it'll switch over automatically to the SD card depending how you set it up. This is a great professional feature if you're, let's say, a wedding photographer or event photographer. So here's a bunch of shots I took with the Canon 5D Mark III. Some are arty and others are just straight photographs. Most were taken with the 24-70 f4 Canon zoom. I've had my 5D Mark III for many years and have used it on every single professional shoot I've been on. This camera has never ever let me down. So this is Jeff, thanks for watching, and I'll talk with you soon.